Okay, hello, and welcome to this eSchool News webinar, What Innovations K-12 Schools Should Keep Post-Pandemic. My name is Kevin Hogan. I am editor-at-large for eSchool News, and I'm excited to have you join us for what should be a very informative session. Today's event is brought to you by Zendesk, a company that makes customer service better. They build software to meet customer needs, set teams up for success, and keep organizations in sync. Zendesk powers billions of conversations, connecting more than 100,000 organizations with hundreds of millions of customers over telephone, chat, email, messaging, social channels, communities, review sites, and help centers. At Zendesk, they provide schools, both big and small, with the right solution for all departments, whether it be IT, administration, or counseling. Developing a single comprehensive support strategy not only promotes operational efficiency and cost savings, but it is the best way to provide an A+ customer support experience your students and faculty are bound to rave about. Before we go to our panelists, I'd like to take a minute to go over some of the features, the platform that we're using for the webinar. Today's event will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about missing a thing. Within a few days, you'll receive an email message that contains a link to the recorded webinar, along with a PDF of the slides. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the Q&A box. There will be a time at the end of the presentation for our speakers to address questions. Also, there is a chat function that you can launch by clicking on chat. Feel free to use this to contact someone from eSchool News if you're having a technical question, but please don't use that to ask questions of our speakers. There's also a closed caption tab if you need. So with that, I want to move on and introduce our panelists today. Very excited to have all of them on board here. First, Teresa Anania. I knew I'd mess it up, Teresa. Teresa is Vice President of Global Customer Success and Renewals at Zendesk, where she is responsible for the management and development of the company's global client base, including all customer segments from enterprise to their smallest customers. Her remit is to ensure that Zendesk's customers are realizing maximum business value across the customer life cycle and achieving their RI goals, which ensures their renewal and opportunity for expansion. Next, we have Kimberly Smith. Kimberly has more than 20 years of experience in marketing and public relations. As Director of Communications and PR for a Leaf Independent School District in Houston, Texas, she is principally responsible for the strategic marketing and public relations for that district, which has over 47,000 students in 45 campuses, proving that Texas does do things bigger. Also, we have Michael Anab, Director of Technology at Valley Christian Schools in San Jose. Mike joined the school in 1997, working to support faculty and staff within the IT group. Since that time, he's led automation and technology integration efforts that catapulted VCS's reputation as one of the premier private schools in the Bay Area, specifically in the use of technology for learning, as well as streamlining the business side of the organization. So all of you, welcome. Thank you so much for your time and for your insights. Looking forward to a great conversation. As you can tell from the title, it's a pretty hot topic for all the folks in your field. And I guess before we get started with the conversation, we want to ask our audience, Vince, if you could push the poll out so we can ask our group who is out there, have your schools adopted any new technologies over the past year, or I'd even say year and a half? As we get into it, I think we'll talk about Black Friday in March of 2020 as the day that everything changed and the greatest beta test in education history began, and I think we're still in it. So we'll take a couple seconds and you can answer that. Well, how about that answer? Yes, 100%. That's a new one. That's great. That's interesting. So actually, I'll say to the groups out there, as we're having this conversation, I wanted to be intentionally back and forth. So if you have some ideas that you found in your own districts, enter them into the Q&A, and we can bring them up and we can talk about them as we go along. But to get started, maybe Mike and Kimberly, we can talk about that day. that your minds had to wrap around the fact that your students would be going home and not be coming back. At that time, we were thinking for 2 weeks, right? Kimberly, maybe we'll start with you. What was your experience on those days?
Well, horrific to start with. It was, you don't necessarily have a plan for something like a 100-year pandemic, especially when you're charged with educating children, and then dealing with parents and community members who are also looking to the schools for information. So luckily, we had been paying attention to what was happening on the other side of the world before it actually hit our waters, and we looked to what they were doing. We also, Seattle was one of the hardest hit in the beginning, and so prior to our schools closing, we were looking to Seattle for kind of any type of inside information to learn on how we should navigate.
Yeah, and Mike, how about yourself?
Yeah, for us, so a lot of mixed feelings. Obviously, just fear the unknown. Trying to absorb all of the information coming at you from news sources, mainstream news, as well as talking to colleagues in the area, other private schools. Like, what are you guys doing? What's your plan? But also some excitement for us because we have had years-long cloud migration process that really was related to disaster recovery planning and business continuity planning. And so I found that we actually had a lot of resources already in place to be able to kind of pivot fairly easily. I say that with some air quotes, but it was feasible. And so I had some excitement, some hope that we could pull this thing off. It took us about, I think, 2 weeks of working with our educators and understanding what it would take to shift from in-person instruction to online instruction when none of our teachers were really online teachers. So that was like our biggest challenge. But having those tools in place, again, made it really feasible and it worked.
Yeah, that seems like one of the big things that there was for a lot of progressive districts and for districts that had the resources. The infrastructure was there, and the biggest challenge involved, as you say, professional development, teacher behavior, student behavior, and then parent behavior, right? Because they became part of the equation pretty early on as they became teaching assistants.
That's absolutely right. One of the things that we developed as part of this, just moving from online or from in-class to online, was a parent support portal, just a place for parents to go. And we had one for faculty and staff, we had one for students, but we built one for parents as well, because again, just everybody had questions, and just tying up phone lines, and you couldn't walk on campus. So how do you, connect the parents with the right, staff person to answer a question? So that was one of the things that came out of this that we're going to keep.
Absolutely. And Teresa, talk a little bit about from your perspective. I've spoken with a lot of executives from ed tech companies as well as just general technology companies who really, to all of your credit, really responded well to the education community right away. Was really almost like a first responder sort of answer to schools and educators who were looking for help. So I'm sure your customer service department took quite a leap starting on March 20th.
Yeah, actually, that was about 1 month after I joined Zendesk. So you can imagine I was trying to really just dig in and learn more about our business and listen and learn. And instead, really had to be at the table with our executives about a strategy for being extremely responsive to our customers' needs at that time. And to everyone's point, we didn't even know what was ahead. We didn't know how long it was going to go. I think, my own personal perspective on education is just deep because I have 3 children. So I was dealing with, high school and college experiences for them that were varied. And then also, Zendesk has a real footprint on making a social impact. And so it was honestly, for my first few months there, amazing to see how we really wanted to be there for, the education industry. We offered free starter packs to get started with offering some of the digital capabilities that not only our students, but even your parents would expect. And then, we had a COVID alias where if you needed immediate help, how you might get to us. I was pretty excited, not only how the company took care of us as employees, but also the way we really wanted to focus on our customers, and education was right at the forefront.
Yeah, and it seemed that I think, I know for a number of district leaders I've spoken to, as well as folks on the provider side, there was a little bit of guilty pleasure because there were techniques and tools that districts and schools have been advocating for years, right? Taking home one-to-one, having more synchronous communications with parents. Kimberly, talk a little bit about that. I mean, were there some innovations that were kind of in the wait that just were always considered a luxury, or people were like, nah, I don't need to use that to communicate with my teachers, who all of a sudden then had to use it whether they like it or not?
Yeah, so our district is a little bit different. We are 86% free and reduced meals, so we have a lower socioeconomic population. So our challenges were probably a little bit different than most school districts across the nation. So not only the accessibility to devices, to access their online learning, it was the connectivity as well. So we had to mobilize hotspots and make all these purchases on the fly. Luckily, we were one of the first to get in and make those orders, just knowing, kind of planning for the immediate future. But as far as, I'll just tap into what Teresa was saying, is customer service. That's a really big hot button issue, especially with public schools. And so one of the things that we have tried really hard to do here in ALEAF is to ensure that parent communications is, in the forefront. And so, especially during a pandemic where nobody, everyone's just kind of, running blind, we wanted to make sure that we had the tools, which we did. Luckily, we've had Zendesk for 3 years. So this is our 3rd year. And really what it did, we were able to set up a self-service where people could use the answer bot, and we could follow trends to know what types of questions parents and students were asking. Was it about their online learning? Was it about needing more access to their teachers? What kind of supports do they need? And we were able to address those quickly, either through self-service or having a staff member reach out to them. And in addition, we were able, if it was something that was trending, we were then able to use our social media and try to get in front and ahead of the flood of questions that are similar that would come in. So I mean, if anything, like customer service aspect of it, I mean, this is definitely what we had envisioned. It was just we were forced to do it a lot quicker.
Yeah, and I'll assume there was an acceleration of need as well, right? I mean, what would you use the Autobot for before the pandemic?
Actually, we hadn't used the answer bot feature. We had where a ticketing system where people could just click on contact us and they can kind of shoot through whatever questions they may have or whatever issues they may have. What we liked about that system was that it was customizable, so we could integrate certain fields, know what campus their concern is with or the question is with. They were able to submit things anonymously. So the answer bot actually was, as we were seeing those tickets coming through, we're able to create a library of answers. So it, I mean, I'm sure Teresa can answer this in the technical sense of it, but it basically tags onto keywords, and then it populates what your answer might be based on what your question was and what those words were. So that has helped tremendously as far as people getting the answers immediately.
That sounds like downright artificial intelligence, Teresa. When the designers were putting this stuff together, I mean, what sort of questions were they anticipating getting in the answer bot for educators versus questions surrounding a global pandemic? I don't think that was probably on the list of possibilities, was it?
Well, no, you're right. You can't predetermine the kinds of questions that might come up, but to Kimberly's point, just being smart and having that automation and that workflow available to develop the patterns and the analytics that help then determine how you get ahead of it with helpful questions that frankly parents and or students would probably prefer to have addressed through that self-serve and don't even want to wait for a human. I think that digital channel is the very next frontier for all of education. If they're not already using it, it's a great way not only to self-serve and provide more optimal use of that human capital, but also a way to collect some basic information before you ever engage that human. So I think it even makes the human on the other side that has to provide service. And in the case of education, they might have other jobs, like totally other jobs, like teaching. It makes them enjoy better the experience because they've been, given kind of all the critical information, or at least tried through that digital channel to address it before needing them. So it's great for the customer or parent, in this case, student, but it's also great for those providing the service. And I think that's the next level if some folks out there haven't tried that. And then the next level beyond that is even more exciting. It's messaging and really connecting up that chat bot, that answer bot experience with what might be needed in the next layer of the conversation. So that consistent, I don't know how many of you will try a chat bot or an answer bot and get frustrated. It doesn't answer your question. So then what next? Well, you need a human, let's say. Well, when that happens, you might have to be asked to start over, and that's super frustrating. So what I love about our messaging strategy is it's all connected. If you then move to a human to address it, they have the benefit of all that already was tried in that initial digital experience. So pretty exciting stuff.
Mike, do you have any examples of the use of analytics during this pivot to remote learning and hybrid learning?
Sure. Yeah. So, we've leveraged, I think, Zendesk very well in terms of just IT staff being able to extend ourselves, working from home, trying to connect with 350 some odd faculty and staff, connecting with students, connecting with their parents. Supporting parents was something that we've never really had to do formally pre-pandemic. So that just blew up the number of people that we actually supported as internal customers or just external customers. So one of the things we did with Zendesk was we started porting out metrics from the Zendesk database to visualize how many open tickets we had, qualitative feedback, percentage of customer satisfaction rates. In terms of our team, the top solvers of the day, we sort of gamified our work, kind of promoted that all those benchmarks. There was a little bit of consternation early on, to sort of put our team in a bit of a spotlight. But what I had anticipated was that, our work was something to be proud of. And people responded really well to that. We're the only team on campus that publishes our stats, our customer satisfaction rates, and just data about the kind of work we do. We actually use a third-party tool to kind of create that, sort of a kiosk. We publish it to the web. We publish it to our knowledge base, which is another tool that we leveraged to provide some self-service. We integrated 4 of our tools right directly into Zendesk. So when our team is working on a ticket, they have access to our inventory management tool. They have access to our remote management tool. They have access to obviously launching our video conferencing tool directly from the Zendesk ticket itself. And so just using all of our systems and integrating them into Zendesk, Zendesk becomes sort of the hub, the starting off point. And just managing all those tickets helps us work smarter, more organized, and make sure that we don't, miss people. The one thing that we've had to do is, kind of be a little bit flexible. So we've integrated the Zendesk chat feature. We've never really needed chat because, we're kind of a medium-sized organization, but for the most part, there's a lot of, traffic into our training center, email, we've got an urgent helpline. But when you're working remotely, there is no desk phone. And we've had to leverage, chat, and obviously giving out our cell phones. So that's kind of what we've done. And again, just for metrics, we do the surveys after every other ticket that's closed. They rate, and we learn from that. And so that helps us kind of change what we do, improve what we do, and just sit back and look and say, what kind of job are we doing?
Yeah. Teresa, Mike mentioned they're kind of a medium-sized organization with, it sounds like hundreds, maybe thousands of folks. And then you have Kimberly talking about close to 50,000 students across 45 campuses. I think sometimes providers get a perception like, well, we handle big districts or we handle small districts. Zendesk, you handle the scale?
Oh, yes. We started, though, just so you know, back when as, a great solution and continue to be one for the smallest of companies, really. So we have a great online buying experience that is so super easy. You could self-serve. It's very easy to get up and ready very quickly. But we also, as you just intimated, cover large mid-market and enterprise accounts as well. And, I think the way you scale as a company, we're scaling at Zendesk. The cool thing about my job is that we're using Zendesk. So it's Zendesk on Zendesk. And I walk the walk and talk the talk with all of you that have to do this. And so we bring a lot of that thought leadership, that industry best practice in. So even the largest companies with the highest amount of volumes are absolutely using our solutions and getting that fast time to value. I mean, yes, the pandemic has required the education institutions to probably accelerate some of this infrastructure, the cloud, and the ways we optimize service for students and parents. But the whole industry is going through a transformation as well. And so I think getting that fast time to value and being able to see how you self-serve as a business or an IT leader to actually be able to implement this quickly across multiple channels and start to get insights that can help drive a better experience and better business health. I think it's a pretty exciting proposition. And you can get started small or you could go all in. So we're definitely here to support. That's what my organization does. So
yeah, that's great. And I'm so tired of talking about the pandemic and all the aspects of it, but it continues on. And with each progressive conversation I have, I start to hear the ideas and the techniques that people took with the technology and applied them. I'll ask both Mike and Kimberly to think about, after the initial shock of March and just kind of trying to get everything together, and as you move through the summertime into the fall, were there ever any moments where any aha moments where you're like, you know what, we did this, we made it happen, never thought we'd have to do it, we've done it, and now we're going to keep it? Kimberly, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Lots and lots of aha moments, but really the biggest thing was how essential communications is and how essential facts are, and being able to arm our parents and our students with factual information is certainly important. It always has been important, but it was ever more important, during this time. We even had actually other parents from other school districts hopping onto our platform and our website to find information because they weren't able to find the information on their school's websites. So that is what I do as far as communications is concerned and public relations, but it just really highlights how essential information and the ability to obtain information easily, how important that is.
So instead of just putting up school schedules and the date of the pasta dinner, you had to put up information regarding masks and CDC guidance and that sort of stuff. And you had to make sure that it was accurate, right?
Yeah, and so what happens if a student falls ill or test positive? What is the protocol after that? So, there are layers upon layers of protocols that we had to adopt. Luckily with the health, in conjunction with local health officials, we were able to work through plans and post plans and things of that nature. So, and just not with pandemic, but also, accessing learning. Believe it or not, there were kids who weren't attending school virtually or just didn't show up, check in virtually. And so our teams had to go out and find them and then get them engaged in the online learning. So, our staff they are rock stars. It's amazing what education and educators did and continue doing.
So those procedures, not only just like the actual documentation and information, but the way in which you collected it will now become protocol for you going forward for other, hopefully not as grim situations as this, but just, other kind of like district-wide implementations.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mike, how about you? When you look back on it, was there ever one where you're like, hey, we should have been doing it this way all along?
Gosh, I would say, so I agree with Kimberly. We had a very similar kind of aha moment, but in general, I would say just providing the video conferencing tools, I think is something that we probably should have been doing. We've talked about doing it. We've had a couple of, false starts. We've in the past had a virtual learning program, and it peters off because there's no better way to learn than in-class instruction, the Socratic method, debate, face-to-face, building relationships between teacher and student. I mean, let's face it, video conferencing is a distant second to being there with your classmates, with your instructor. So having said that, I think what we're looking at now post-pandemic, if we can even say post-pandemic, I think we're still in the pandemic, is leveraging video conferencing tools and our online support tools like Zendesk to do new things that can help bridge that gap between in-person instruction and the quality associated with that, and then also online instruction. So for example, I think for us, providing a continued method for online instruction at whatever level is appropriate for the time provides greater student choice and flexibility so that they can learn when it's convenient for them, almost like a collegiate model, right? So you and I want to take a class, we want to audit, or do a Harvard X or whatever. A lot of times those are not set between this hour and that hour. They're pre-recorded. You watch at your own leisure, you ingest the information at the rate that's comfortable. You may go back and if it's a particularly challenging subject, watch it again. And then there are other, ancillary type community connections that are there. So I implemented Zendesk community feature, which I think doesn't get enough credit. It's a really great way for people with similar kinds of interests or needs to get together and brainstorm. So it's essentially taking our faculty workroom and moving it into a digital space so that like-minded folks can have that conversation and do it in a way that is now there's a record of it. And so when we have a new teacher coming in 5 years from now, they don't have to start over. They can go and kind of refresh and see what's out there and kind of get a boost moving forward. So those are kinds of, some of the things that we look at. And obviously the pandemic was horrible and I wouldn't wish it on society, but there are some silver linings from a standpoint of being able to leverage tools. I think you said at the top of this that, it was I forgot what term you used, but it was definitely a kickstart to get some of these things really used. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
I just want to weigh in as a parent. I am so excited that, again, to your point, like we would never wish this on anyone. But since we've all had to go through this, how do we come out of it just a little bit better, as a people, as a community? I know just being connected as a parent, Maybe it's a little bit painful sometimes for the school, but it's essential because we're the biggest advocates of that program. And so knowing a little bit more about the plans with our children, I think is super helpful and healthy. And then the only thing my son complains about is he misses snow days. I think those might be gone forever, right? Because now bad weather, okay, we could still do online learning.
Yeah.
So there's some real positives out of all of this that I think are going to make this more accessible. Think of all the different languages that you might have to support in certain schools. You know, this option is just providing so much more connectivity. And so I like that you both are thinking about kind of a hybrid best of both worlds.
Yeah. And I'll just add to, you know, we have to take care of our teachers too. I mean, you know, we're a factory that produces educational experiences and knowledge, but really it's our teachers that are driving, you know, the driving force behind that, right? It's not me, it's the teachers. And so we always have to look at, you know, can we create better efficiencies in that educational process? Look, one of the reasons that our online learning program didn't take off earlier is because we tried to take our in-class teacher and add on additional online responsibilities. You know, that doesn't work. And we've learned that lesson. And so, but here we are during the pandemic, essentially, we started off doing the same thing, saying, okay, for all of you in class, it's not feasible to hire a different workforce, right? And so we had to figure out a way that they weren't duplicating their efforts and they weren't, you know, I mean, imagine if you're a programmer and someone says, well, great, you know how to program in this language, but now we want you to do it over here. Well, you're a programmer, aren't you? You know, it's just not really feasible. So we had to focus on leveraging our tools to make a teacher's life bearable. And again, the transition was tough, but what we got there, and I think those lessons learned are going to help teachers carry forward no matter what, you know, whether we're in class or whether we're online. I feel like we'll probably be hybrid for a time to come, maybe forever, at some level. And so let's say we're completely out of this pandemic. Will we ever lose our video conferencing aspect? I don't think so. I think we'll always have a need for some, you know, student population to get that information whenever and wherever they are.
So maybe we just won't have as much of it after the pandemic, right?
Sure.
So there won't be the Zoom fatigue, but it will complement current in-person situations.
Exactly, that's right.
Kimberly, talk a little bit about what Mike was mentioning in terms of the teachers and the faculty. And I think it's a very important point, which is often overlooked because we're all focused on the children and the students, obviously, but you also saw during this time the group trauma that we've all experienced with the teachers and their inability sometimes and their ability to come up with their own innovations to both keep kids connected and safe. Talk a little bit about your workforce there and how they responded and any innovations you can point to.
So our workforce, we have 6,500 employees. And so about 3,000 of those are teachers across the district, which range from very new teachers to those who've been in the field, you know, maybe 30 plus years. So there was a very steep learning curve as far as virtual learning was considered and how to facilitate that. I will say that, you know, regardless of the abilities of the teacher, wherever they were on that spectrum, they all wanted to do their best job for the kids. So that was our number one priority, obviously across the district, was whatever they had to do to educate kids so that they got their learning. Obviously was not ideal. Again, I'll emphasize that we had lower socioeconomic population. So we had a lot of frontline workers, parents who, you know, they didn't have the option of working virtually. They maybe worked at a fast food place or Walmart or, you know, who knows. So they had to go to work. And sometimes they would have, you know, multiple children in the home of various ages. Well, what we saw was, you know, it tended to be sometimes where an older child would be trying to assist and facilitate learning with a younger child. So, education and during this pandemic really brought out a lot of inequities, I would say, especially in our district. But you know what? Once we would find out about those situations, our teachers, they would go to the homes, they would provide extra materials for those kids, working extended hours to try to make sure that they could get tutorial services. A lot of things like that were going on across our district. And that really emphasizes the care that educators have. And I know that, we as Americans become complacent a lot of times, especially when it's considering something like education. We've always been trying to, how do we fix it? How do we fix it? And then bureaucracy and this and that. But I think everybody, especially if you were a parent who had to sit down with your child and actually see what a teacher goes through, you became the teacher. I think I would hope that they become really vocal advocates for teachers and for education.
Yeah, definitely. As someone who's written about education technology for 15 years, there were always these myths that would continue to pop up. One of which was, I think amongst teachers themselves, a fear that technology would somehow replace them in the classroom. This pandemic has certainly shown that there is no replacement for teachers, and that the technology truly can be a help and an empowerment, and give teachers agencies in what they're doing, both on the instructional side and kind of what we're talking about here on the efficiency side, right? I mean, so Teresa, these are the tools and the techniques that I think districts are discovering that they can use, are the same ones that corporate America and other different vertical industries have used to make things more efficient on the other side, something that might not necessarily be in the K-12 public education space.
Mhm.
Would you agree?
That is so true. And I think if you think about it, parents and students are consumers. They're buying and participating in other SaaS-based solutions every day. And so they've come to expect a certain new level of service, a certain new level of connectivity and personalization, frankly. So, I think the benefit of having a more digital experience and then being able to use some automation to be more intelligent about how you route the service, this is all going to build some of the best information about what the preferences of that parent or student are. And then how do you take some of that and eventually think about ultimately being able to use it to basically build a customer success experience that is targeted with the student's best interests in mind, targeted with the parents' best interests. So you can almost be preventative and not just reactive and responding to their needs in the moment. So this is the way business has gone. I'm certain education is right there. And I think it's going to be such a great way to ensure the student's success and prevent them dropping off, from either engaging with some great course materials that are best suited to their long-term aspirations. I mean, think of all the great ways that it can work both to react and to be more proactive.
Yeah, definitely. One of the topics that continue, well, right before the pandemic was the number one concern in my conversations with district leaders: cybersecurity and the safety of both the network as well as the children and the faculty who are using it. That has continued to be a concern, if not even a greater concern, during COVID-19. Mike and Kimberly, maybe you can both talk to that topic and how that works in conjunction with the type of work you're doing with Zendesk. Mike, we'll start with you this time.
Okay. Definitely concerned. What we've seen is that our click rates in terms of our security awareness phishing tests that we run every month have increased. So that's a bad thing. So people, faculty and staff that have been working from home, I think, I'm just guessing here, but maybe psychologically you're at home, you're not in your corporate environment, maybe you're a little more relaxed. and not as aware of those threats coming in via email. The majority of our threats do come from phishing type email messages that we try to train our teachers, really use some discernment, stay vigilant, don't click on just any message. But as most places, people get busy and they're just trying to get through their inbox, trying to get through their day. They've got a lot of things on their mind. So that's been a challenge for us. We've taken some different measures. Again, just how it relates to Zendesk. I'd say the biggest thing is that we leverage our knowledge base to provide some tutorials and some trainings. We've embedded videos into our KB pages. We've linked them. We've created kind of an IT website based on our Zendesk knowledge base, just by skinning it and making it look like a completely separate entity. And we're really happy with it. And so we just drive traffic to the knowledge base, and as much as possible, try to get people to take ownership for their own experience and responsibility for their own learning, and just encouraging our 21st century educators to be lifelong learners. I think it would be sort of ironic that you sometimes will come across a teacher that is a little bit resistant to learning. Seems like the antithesis of who you are and what you do, but it happens. And so we just try to gently encourage them across different platforms in different ways, repeatedly. And for those efforts, our fish rate, our click rate is far below a similar K-12 school our size, our industry. So I think we're doing okay.
That's great. Now, Kimberly, give us a little kind of a synopsis of that situation when it comes to a lead.
Yeah, so like Mike referenced, our IT department has done a stellar job of not only checking out devices to our 47,000 students, but ensuring that our teachers have the appropriate technology and safety and security on their devices as well. So I'm not really privy to all that happened, but I know that they were working 24/7, on those devices, and also troubleshooting and things of that nature. So I can speak to security as it relates to Zendesk and how we use it, as far as some of our tickets that come in, some of our contact us. We were able to customize those forms to ensure that certain student information was not attached to that ticket, which is required by law. We also are required to allow anonymous tickets. In the normal situation, this was actually a law was passed in Texas that's called David's Law, which is an anti-bullying law. And that's something that we were able to prop up when that law passed a few years ago. But even outside of the face-to-face learning, students were still able to submit tickets like that. Also, sometimes community members or parents would just have valid concerns, especially about the pandemic and how the schools were facilitating mitigation efforts, or safety, cleaning efforts, things of that nature. And they would submit anonymous tickets as well. So what we really love about the system is that regardless of whether it's there's a name attached to it or contact information attached to it, it helps us to, if there are multiple anonymous tickets and we don't have a library Q&A that actually references that concern, we can easily and quickly go ahead and put one in there. So that way it's addressed.
And I suppose that was really the only channel for communication when it came to sensitive information that might otherwise have, someone would have gone to a guidance counselor or to a principal, right? When you're in the remote setup.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. And again, another innovation that might not have been the intent before the pandemic, but really became a powerful tool. That's really fascinating. Teresa, talk about that. Talk about Well, I know Mike had referenced the community tools earlier, but also these security tools that Kimberly mentioned. Are these innovations that you're going to see further applied into Zendesk applications going along? It seems to me like that's the nature of your work, is to this continuous improvement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for sure on the security front, like you can imagine, we take that very seriously, and we do have the full boat of combination of both enterprise, class security features, which would truly benefit education as well. And then we do a regular set of comprehensive audits, and that's of our applications, our systems, our network. So, I mean, we have all the compliance certifications, that the best of the best have. There's all sorts of great ways to ensure that your setup is taking full advantage of authentication and things like that. We certainly have artifacts, that are both NDA and non-NDA to provide full visibility on, all of the security that matters to some of the most regulated industries, not to mention, the education one. So I think that's an aspect that we take very seriously. As far as like community and some of the great new things coming, I will tell you, we have often put together our customers or even our prospective customers in these community mindshare experiences. One of the great things about, again, this post-COVID world is we too are leveraging technology more than ever to connect up what's happening in the space, not just Zendesk specific, really agnostic of the software, but really sharing like what's happening in the industry, also mapping that to some of the vision we have in designing out better community, better experiences, and again, making them easier, more agile. So I recommend them. They're called Mindshare events. And on our website, we also have information about what's coming next in that series, and might be a great way to learn more specifically, or even start to ask questions of your peers and some like-minded individuals.
That sounds fantastic. Pardon me. Let's talk a little bit about, as we get closer to the top of the hour here, any particular tools and techniques. This is a lot of left field, but you can't wait to remove from your day-to-day existence. Anything that you've had to endure here where it's like, I just can't wait for this to go back to normal, Kimberly?
Well, this is horrible to say, but yeah, Zoom, I can live without that.
24/7 Zoom, right?
Yeah. I mean, one a week is okay, but yeah, you're right, Teresa. It got to be definitely Zoom fatigue, but I mean, obviously it was a necessity. That was how we had to do things, and we had to continue working and collaborating with one another. But yeah, I'd rather not go through another pandemic and have to do Zooms every day, all day.
Right. Mike, you mentioned that you like Zoom in smaller doses, right?
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with Zoom. Necessary evil. Obviously, it's got its downsides, but it's been rock solid for us. It's really been a great tool. It's helped us transition from in-class to online. I think one of the things that I do appreciate about video conferencing, and I may be in the minority here, I have a hard time in meetings, and so it's all of the hour-long meetings that could have been handled in 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I try to, in my job, I've got to save every, minute I can to remain productive and handle the needs that we have. So very low tolerance for meetings that waste a lot of time, which unfortunately is a lot of meetings. So I like that Zoom meetings tend to be shorter and to the point, and then you're done. So, like I said, love-hate relationship. Certainly we're gonna, as soon as we can, we'll probably go back to in-person meetings. So, we'll see.
Yeah, so we don't want to eliminate it, but let's
Right.
tailor it down, right?
Yeah,
Into smaller
absolutely.
doses.
Use it as a way to expand the pie, not to take the same interactions and just flip them to all less connected and in person. I can't attend every parent teacher, or at least I want my husband to attend some with me, since when I attend, he's like, you got this. But when it's on Zoom, sometimes it works and we can both experience that, and we wouldn't have otherwise been able to. So I think that's the cool part. But
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Teresa, because that's one of the things that we want to keep, is having that flexibility for parents, especially like I had mentioned, some of our parents are working during the day, very limited, but at least this way they can connect through their mobile device or their telephone, and they're able to engage with what their kids, are experiencing throughout the day. So, so yeah, we'll definitely keep open house and meet the teacher events where they can visit both ways.
Either way. Yeah, that's great.
I would love to see Zendesk, just speaking of nothing, I'd love to see Zendesk kind of integrate a remote support tool, so that, folks like me who use remote support all the time don't have to use a third party. And the integration works great now, but it is a third party tool. So we lose some of the data associated with that, remote support session.
Mike, I'm taking that straight down.
Yeah, it would definitely be something I would jump all over.
I guess one trend that we didn't touch upon, and we have a few minutes left, that I'd just like to ask about it, is the idea of social emotional learning and the use of these tools. It really seems that BP, before the pandemic, I call it, that was a kind of a squishy term that was maybe a nice to have, but not necessarily something that's essential. And obviously now is first and foremost. And it's not only in the relationship with the students, but it's amongst parents and teachers and administrators together. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that social emotional learning, or even just a more general sense of empathy, has been enabled because of these innovations? Kimberly, we'll start with you this one.
Sure. Yeah, actually, I mean, I think everybody has been touched in a way about this, throughout this experience, that has affected either their emotions or their mental health in one way or another. And what I myself personally have gotten out of all of this is, being more mindful, being more empathetic, being more self-care. Like, that is really important, and this pandemic has really emphasized the importance of that. So social emotional learning, that is actually one of our biggest pieces of the pie that we're starting to integrate for this upcoming year, through the influx of ESSER funding. We have a lot of programs that we're implementing. We've added some counselors. We're also creating little Zen rooms across, which is kind of funny, Zendesk. So we have Zen rooms across the district, not only for students, but also for faculty and staff. So absolutely, that's going to play a key component as we emerge from the pandemic, as we still deal with it this coming year, and moving forward, for sure.
Yeah, there's almost like an inverse intimacy when there's communication this way, right? I mean, there's a lot of power dynamics when, if I remember in high school, going to the principal's office of worry and fear. If you're having a conversation with the counselor or a teacher, or even, and look, there are dynamics. Teresa, you said you have 3 kids. I have 3 kids. You could have some parent-teacher conferences, which might be a little bit awkward in person, that maybe you can get a little bit more intimate about it in this setup. Mike, maybe you could talk a little bit about, have you had any of those strategies or innovations put in place as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, really, really insightful question, Kevin. We did, and for us too, it was a nice to have. We started paying more close attention to the social emotional needs of kids probably a couple of years before the pandemic hit. We had a new hire, somebody that was trained in counseling and sort of emotional support at each of our schools, at each level of elementary, middle school, and high school. So that ramped up during the height of COVID and the stay-at-home orders and all of that. A lot of kids were being reported as being depressed. The parents were concerned. They were reaching out to the school. Do you have any resources? What do you suggest I do? And so we've actually partnered with a third-party counseling firm that, so they're not employed by us directly, but we give access to these counselors for our kids that really need it. We have staff on site to handle, I would say, the more sort of low-level, minor type, student just needs to talk through what they're feeling and they're not comfortable talking to their parents. Those are the strategies that we employ, but definitely a lot of kids were adversely affected, obviously, by being separated from their peer group, from their friends. A lot of kids miss school. They miss the way that school traditionally is done, and they were clamoring to come back. And so those were kind of our strategies, and I think it works. It's still not 100%. Nothing in the virtual world's 100%, but those are kinds of some of the things that we've done.
Thank you. I knew that the hardest part of this of my job here this hour would be to end the conversation, as there's so many different innovations and aspects, and we could go on for a good other hour. Kimberly, to your point, we should have one about the funding too, and about what all innovations we're going to have with all the funding that hopefully comes down the pike, and we can look at the glass half full scenario. But before we reach our time here, I just wanted to kind of give everyone an opportunity to kind of give a glass half full, where you see your district, your school, and Teresa, in your case with Zendesk, where you see, if best case scenarios play out, your use and the innovations that we've been talking about this hour being implemented in your place of work. And Mike, maybe we'll go back to you for the first response.
Sure. As I said earlier, I feel excited about what we've been able to do as, using the pandemic as impetus to kind of kickstart use of some of these technologies that we've been building for years, moving into the cloud for business continuity purposes, and realizing that, you hope to never have to use disaster recovery plans and business continuity plans. But the fact that we were able to leverage these tools to support online instruction has been great. And I am hopeful that we'll carry a lot of these tools forward to provide student choice and flexibility, and also ease the burden a little bit on teachers. We've had students in the past that needed supplemental instruction, so that teacher had to create 2 sets of lesson plans and 2 sets of curricula and all of that. So we don't have to do that anymore. Now we can take what we're doing in class, stream it live, provide a secure link, provide all the resources and ancillary documents that are associated with that lesson online in the cloud, through our learning management system, through Google Workspace, and all the other tools that we have, and extend the classroom beyond the walls. So I'm hopeful that that's going to keep going for a long time.
That's great. Thank you. And Kimberly.
Yeah, so I always believe that through crisis comes opportunity, and I truly believe that we have many opportunities here. What Mike was saying about customizing learning, personalizing learning for kids. Home life is different for one child versus another child. So it may not be that they're able to get all their schoolwork done, during the regular school day. So having the ability to access that schoolwork, on their own, outside of regular school hours is really important for their success as far as, being an engaged student. With the teachers, us supporting is that we can providing additional tools so that they can communicate with students and their parents. That's vitally important, and obviously we're going to continue to do that. And I enjoy the efficiency that we've become a much leaner, not leaner in as far as workforce is concerned, but leaner as far as how we use our time. We've become much more efficient as a district.
That's a huge point. And I think that's a huge point for the K-12 industry in general. To build in those efficiencies are going to have really great effects for everything. Teresa, we'll leave you with the last word.
Oh, wow. Well, I would just say that, I think with what we've all been through and just what we see ahead, we're all better for it. We're stronger. I am ecstatic about the acceleration of innovation and digitization, especially in this industry. I think the impact that can have on the outcomes that we want for our students in their education process can be dramatic and have such implications for this country and this world. It's super exciting. And then I think meeting students where they are and providing access in many different forms now than maybe previously existed, the possibilities of that are just endless. So I'm so inspired by what you all do. I can tell you education means so much. And I would just say any way that we can help enable that experience for parents and students, we're here ready to help. It's important to us as parents and in the business that cares so much about social impact.
Well, that's great. And with that, Teresa, thank you for spending the hour with us. And Mike,
It was
and
great.
Kimberly, the conversation I think was really powerful. I encourage our audience to go back and listen to the recording and take some notes because I know there are a lot of good insights on how schools can improve themselves using technologies such as Zendesk. So with that, I would like to remind you also that you will get that email within the next few days that contains the link. Thank you all for sticking with us through this hour. Thanks again for participating with questions, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye, everyone.